of a processor that are important. So you're having this control unit that's actually just ensuring which instructions are being done. Then you have ALU, arithmetic logic unit, which actually does logical operations, and then you're feeding it from memory, and you're feeding that memory from like input devices and sending everything to output devices. Now, what's important with memory, and we are still using this architecture today, is you have key value pairs in working memory, and you have both data and the operations inside in this key store, which consequently led to designing a language which actually works on that low level of processors. And we still use this language today. Machine language, and in this particular case, like next level of abstraction, which is a little bit more readable for humans, assembler. Who speaks assembly here? Okay, I salute you, gentlemen. I don't. And languages evolved, and we still have this linear execution as we had earlier, but we keep abstracting, our languages, and we keep compiling them into machine code. And even PHP is being compiled into same PHP machine code. And object-oriented things are also being compiled into same machine code, into same state defined by those really smart people in 40s and 50s. However, we thought Church's model died. Universities continued playing with it and perfected it, and gave us a lot of languages we can actually learn for and we can use to do some interesting things. Now, when we say functional programming, we first think Haskell, but functional programming is not really a language. It's an idea, and that idea has several concepts. First concept being immutability. So we do not really want our variables, once defined, to change, because then we cannot really follow what happens to them. So we can write classes in PHP to ensure immutability. The question is whether is that pragmatic or not. So, or we can just decide, let's not mutate things. Now I'm talking in front of a bunch of Drupal developers and not mutating things. To all of you who are like using hook alters on daily basis is blasphemy. So another concept of functional programming is static typing, which is not really a requirement, but it's super convenient, especially if you want to debug your code on build level. Much more interesting, much more important concept of functional programming is referential transparency. Now we are defining a pure function, a function that's like perfect model, purest model of functional programming, which does not, well, it has several important features, one of them being the fact that you can replace it with a table. So take, for example, sine function. Sine of pi is always going to return 0, saying that you don't have to calculate it, you can remember it somewhere. Referentially transparent function is going to be super easily cacheable, which is something I'm going to talk about later. And again, a super important concept. You have to eliminate side effects of the function, which actually means that function that does something changes a state outside of it is not pure. You don't really know what's going to happen. You cannot repeat it 10 times and get the same response. For example, user save. It's going to write something in the database. It's going to change outside scope, and that you never know if the result is going to be the same every time or what's going to happen there. No external dependencies for a function means that if a function talks to something outside of its scope, for example, the database, first it cannot be referentially transparent, because today if I read or load UID number 1 and get one answer, tomorrow get another answer, another object, I cannot really say I can replace this function with a table. And another important concept is higher order function, which means that the function can accept arguments, well, other functions as arguments, but also spit out functions as results. So, good example is array filter. Who uses our array filter here on a daily basis? So yeah, I don't have to explain it, super. So basically you're going to feed it with a function that says that's a filter, for all users that are age of 18 and give them a beer. Otherwise, if they are female and younger than 13, give them, plush unicorn, because that's what kids like. First class functions are functions that can be passed as argument to other functions. Now, until newest developments in PHP, I believe it's PHP 5.6, right? When we introduced ability to assign an anonymous function to a variable, we couldn't do this. Now we can. So basically, you're just going to say a variable is going to be a function, and then you can pass that variable to other functions, and of course, expect responses as a function. So the question really is, why would we bother with it? It's testable, it's cacheable, it controls complexity of your code, and arguably, it's more performant. Again, from referential transparency, if you can replace a function with a table, you can pretty much use that table as a sanity check of sorts if your function is going to be working. So basically, you're just going to loop through the table, apply the function to parameters, see if results are okay, and that's your test. No mocking. People, no mocking. Who does mocking on a daily basis here? Yeah. It's terrible, right? Another interesting thing is referentially transparent functions are solving the problem of caching and cache invalidation in its core. Because if a function is always going to return the same result, that result can be cached. And we have a new name for it, Memoization, and it works like this. So you have a function. So just imagine a super expensive function that does something on parameters A and B and returns some response. You want to memoize it. What you're going to do is you're going to, wrap it in this memoize function, which is, just call user func array and feed function with the parameters. So this is how you're going to invoke it. And of course, this is still not cached. So then you're going to define a storage, which can be static storage, or you can talk to something else, which is then problematic because it's not, it talks to like external state, but still. And you're going to ensure that if whatever was happening here already happened and was stored in the storage, you're just going to skip this entire execution and return the thing from the storage. Does this sound a little bit complicated? Yeah? No? No? Okay, I mean, you can live with it. It's a lot of code for something that, if it's going to solve the problem of caching, why not? So, talking about complicated. Complexity control does not necessarily mean less code to write. And this is some smart guy doing some smart quotes. I'm not going to read it. So what's higher level of abstraction? So I do not want to think in terms of the stack and push and pop and moving these pointers in the stack frame. Who knows what I'm talking about? Any C developers here? Ex-C developers? A little bit more. So yeah, I do not want to think about memory. I want my compiler to think about memory for me. Okay? I believe that's a safe presumption. I'm a PHP developer. So I want to abstract that away, but I also want to abstract some new things I got used to away. So for example, loop. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to figure out what's in this code. When you figure out what's in this code, just put your hand up. Come on. Okay. Okay. So let's try to abstract away the loop. Could you take a look at this code and let me know what's in it? And I'm going to give you 5 seconds. I hoped it was supposed to be a little bit more readable. Obviously, I made an error. So let's go back. So in this particular case, I'm going to look for this big array of 10 things. And I'm going to find all the things that are odd, that are even, and I'm going to, add them to the square of, to the result, bunch of results as square of even things. So basically, square of even things. This is supposed to be 220. And here I'm doing the same thing. I'm defining a collection of multiple items, and I'm just going to say, okay, filter all the items that do not remain after they were divided by 0. So all the even numbers. Then I'm going to go through the list of results here, and I'm going to square them. And finally, I'm going to sum all those squares up. So this is supposed to be a little bit more readable once you get used to it. I may not, no, maybe I'm wrong. What's the problem? Again, the problem is that you have to use a library for that. And this is the library I wrote in like 30 minutes. So this is not really a good library, do not use it. It's just a proof of case. So, but yeah, you have to require it, you have to use it. You have some base level code you have to maintain. Now, the problem with this solution is that you effectively have 3 different loops. You're looping through all the items to return only even ones, then you're looping from all the even ones to square them, and then you're looping through all the squares to sum them. So this is 3 loops guaranteed. So the previous version is a little bit less readable, theoretically, and a little bit faster. What can else be abstracted away? Think design patterns. Design patterns are not really business logic. Design patterns are something you're using in order to achieve your goals. And if you could abstract them away, that would be awesome. Who knows Decorator Pattern here? Who uses it? Who loves it? Less people. So yeah, I'm going to just be super quick. Decorated Pattern is going to allow us to change properties of objects on runtime. So basically, I want to build a pizza. And that pizza should have, mushrooms, should have mozzarella, and should have basil. So what I'm doing is, I'm first constructing this pizza, and then I'm enriching it by constructing new object mushrooms, and feeding the pizza into that object. And then feeding what else? Mozzarella, creating mozzarella and feeding mushroom pizza into that object. And then doing all the things, and finally, I can do things with this new abstract, abstracted or bigger object, enriched object. So you can do something more readable by constructing new basil, new pizza, new mushroom, new mozzarella, new mushrooms, new pizza object. Now, my question for you is, what is the type of this object? This is not a pizza, this is basil. So it does the thing we want, but it's not kind of perfect. I do not want a new basil, I want a new pizza. So if we manage to abstract away the decorator in something more readable, more user-friendly, that would be awesome. So in this particular case, I'm going to try to abstract it by using simple command called compose. And compose is going to take 3 ingredients, 3 functions, one of them being mushrooms, mozzarella, and basil, and it's going to combine them. So those are my ingredients, just functions that returns, prices, increased by value of these things, and my compose functions is just going to create this bad pizza, which actually is basically a new decorated object. And then I'm going to feed it, of course, with the base price, which is 4, for example. So this is the code which would be amazing if it was such easy to create. Yeah, I have one more slide here. If you want to modify existing pizza, you can just compose new things on top of that. It will just work. However, it's not easy to build such thing because we don't have, compose function in PHP. So we have to write one. So, and boilerplate is amazingly complicated and ugly, so I don't really want to spend too much time on it. Because what I want to do is just require a library which is going to do this for me. So in this particular case, I'm going to use this functional PHP primitives by Lars Stroini, who is a CTO of a German startup called Internations, I guess. So his library is amazing. It has a lot of really interesting features. One of them being composition. So you would basically use function compose and then just compose it from various functions. Now this just works out of the box, and it's beautiful, easy to read. Or if you want to memorize, you can actually use his function to memorize. Just this is the entire code you need to use, and you have your own in-memory storage for complicated operations. Or if you want to work on traversable object a little bit more than this my previous library I just used for demonstration purposes, you can do amazing things with not only map reduce and filter, but also like you can invoke things from arrays, or do selections and everything, and you can combine all those functions together and compose in a single compact function you can execute multiple times. Now, the issue here, and the obvious issue, is of course performance. And really, when you think about it, this is an experiment I did on map filter and reduce operations in PHP, and when using loops, you get more than twice, triple the performance than by using the functional library. So programming functionally in PHP is not really performance. However, it is super safe for you to parallelize stateless processes. So think about coding using all the recommendations from functional programming book. If your functions are pure, if you're not having shared states, you can actually create multiple threads in a way and execute those functions in parallel. Take, for example, the Drupal project, and this is actually a Drupal project I'm maintaining currently. So this is a Drupal commerce which has this once in a month billing thing when we need to bill a lot of customers during a single night. So we need to change states of the orders. We need to request money from their credit cards, and we need to issue invoices and send those invoices by email. And our biggest problem is issuing the invoices because this actually means compiling new PDF documents. So this is a bottleneck, a big bottleneck. However, what's awesome with creating an invoice, it can be super pure function. You're taking an object from Drupal, an order or whatever, And for that particular order, and every single order that looks like that, you're always going to get the same PDF, right? So you can actually add a new queue in front of invoice creating process. That can be Rabbit MQ, or it can be advanced queue in Drupal. Why not? And it is going to allow you to create multiple processes and just execute them in the background. And parallelization is super simple once you know that doing things does not really influence other things. This is the real power of functional programming. And you can go even further. You can abstract away this entire queuing thing and parallelization thing by uploading a function to a cloud. So that function just stands in the cloud without any engine, without running it or anything. It just is there. Latent. Once you send a request to the cloud, it is going to spin out a new virtual machine or container or whatever. It's going to run the function, return result, and it's just going to stop existing as far as, well, you see that as the client. And this architecture actually has a name, a stupid name called serverless, and basically it's compute service on demand. You're not going to pay for the service unless you're actually executing this. So in particular case of invoicing, it would be like we are using the service maybe 5 hours a month. We are going to pay the service 5 hours a month. We are using it a lot, so the service is going to replicate it. I don't know, it's going to create a million of containers that are going to do a million things, and then it's going to die. I'm not aware of it. It's totally abstracted away from me. So that's AWS Lambda. Who tried Lambda already? Okay, several people. Do you love it?
Yes.
It's awesome. But yeah, also Google and Azure and IBM have the similar thing. If somebody wants to use that. To conclude, PHP is not really a functional language. Do not be zealous about using functional paradigms while coding PHP. It's versatile. It's almost paradigm agnostic, general purpose language, but it's not a functional language. So, in the beginning, I had a slide about monads. Monads are super important and super interesting concept for those who are into computing science and Haskell. In Haskell, they are a must because they are the only way to actually store state changing or external state changing operations. So basically, throughout the execution of your code, you want to change the state. You're going to delay changing the state until the execution of the last byte of the code, and then you're going to commit everything. So monads can do those kind of things, basically containers of state. There is a library for that in PHP, but come on, we don't really need that. However, functional style of programming can be used together with object-oriented style of programming. So you can take like the best from both worlds. You can enforce clean code. You can even enforce as much as possible not changing state. Do not use Drupal alters on every single thing you have, because you're going to lose the idea of what's happening with that object throughout the execution. And finally, how many of you are full stack developers doing JavaScript and things? Yeah, so JavaScript is actually amazingly beautiful language for functional programming. And this example for filter map reduce, it works in JavaScript, and it looks beautiful, easy to read, and I believe some browsers are actually handling parallelization and everything. So you don't really have to switch to Haskell to be pragmatic developers right now in functional programming. Thank you. So, questions, please. Rotten Tomatoes, comments, everything. I'm ready. Yes?
How do you use functional programming in your they were?
I try not to change state too much because I'm also working on Drupal 7 project, which is, well, you cannot really go too functional with Drupal 7. But yeah, you can always control, I mean, that's kind of my point. My point is control your state changing functions. Because, you know, really, think about, you know, what happens with user object from the time it was actually, you know, drawn from the database until you're displaying it on the page as, you know, user page. It's like, it's millions of transformations, and you don't really know that because there is this, you know, entity load functions, you know, and then alter functions and whatever. So it may be a little bit too much for debugging once something goes wrong. That's, you know, if you manage to avoid that, that's already, you know, good start for function programming. And I also like to play with math, but that's not on my job. More questions? Rotten Tomatoes, please. Criticism. Yes?
Not so much a question, thanks for the interesting talk. If you want to know more about the circles thing that you mentioned, make sure to catch the last session of the day in the other room.
Do it. Okay then, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Really interesting stuff.
Thank you.
Wasn't expecting an introduction in lambda calculus, but
Yeah.
I like that.
So it's an interesting story. Like when I started, I was really more focused on programming things, and this is like maybe a 10th time I'm doing this session.
Right.
And I transformed it with every single time to more be historical because people were like reacting good to history.
Yeah.
And I actually submitted several like history of programming sessions for DrupalCons. They were always denied, and people are like reacting best on that because it's like when you think about this, all those really amazing people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I love these things, and like also like you know probably a number of file videos on YouTube
course.
and stuff. It's just great to see and